Today, I'll guide you through the story of the Hockenheimring, how this track was created, why it is so important to every F1 fan across the world, and the main question, why now this beauty sits abandoned, mostly reclaimed by the forest. I'll show you. But before that, drop a like on this video and turn on the notifications bell, as this really helps our channel grow. All done? Then buckle up and let's go. Hockenheimring's story kicks off way back in the 1930s. It all came down to the small town in the Rhine Valley, where the one local guy, Ernst Kreis, decided that it's time to put his hometown on the map of the greatest racing tracks. So, in 1932, he set things in motion to bring a track right to Hockenheim. With the town's backing, construction was started, and just like that, Hockenheimring was born. The original track, nicknamed the Triangle Course, or Dreieckskurs for my fellow German patriots out there, was a 12-kilometer, three-pointed monster. Imagine roaring down long, endless straights, then suddenly braking hard into sharp, unforgiving corners, all while speeding through dense forest. Makes your heart race, doesn't it? On top of all that action, there was no crash barriers, no runoff areas. You made a mistake here? Sorry, but you're on your way to hit the trees and roll into the countryside. I guess the bosses of the track were not much concerned about the route's safety in comparison of today's standards. That's what people loved about the track. The speed, the danger, the raw thrill of watching drivers risking their lives just to compete in Hockenheimring. So, by 1938, the track got its first big upgrade with the infamous Ostkurve, a sweeping curve that added even more speed. Now the layout had a more oval-like shape, which made it even more intimidating. Hockenheimring became a proving ground for the bravest drivers in Europe. The track was well on its way to become a motorsport icon. The track had its ups and downs. The first of its misfortunes, World War II, as it pretty much shut everything down in Europe. And motorsport was no exception. Hockenheimring didn't just get dusty sitting around. I guess the area was strategic, so it got chewed up by military vehicles, tanks, and heavy machinery. So, by the time the war ended, Hockenheimring was left in shambles. I guess racing fans were itching to see it restored, and by 1947, just 2 years after the war, the track reopened. The first race was a motorcycle event, but soon enough, cars were tearing up the track again. Hockenheimring was back in the game, better than ever. It became a clear symbol of resilience, if you ask me. As the time flies, bosses of the track totally revamped it. It became modern and expanded. And let me tell you, by the 1960s, there wasn't a spot hotter than the Hockenheimring in the racing world. The track already started to hold major racing events, like the German Motorcycle Grand Prix. The revival brought a whole new masterpiece to the table. The stadium section for the fans. You already know that the atmosphere here is unmatched. Sure, some parts of the forest was blocking the view for the fans, but still, for its time, this stadium was a huge innovation. It became iconic, making Hockenheim one of the most electric places to watch a race. So, in 1968, the story of the Hockenheimring took a dark turn. Jim Clark, arguably one of the greatest drivers ever, lost his life in a Formula 2 race here. Imagine, a legend at the peak of his career, taking on Hockenheim's high-speed far section. And then, in an instant, he's gone. No barriers, no safety features, just him, the trees, and that unforgiving stretch of track. This tragedy shook the automotive world to its core. Eventually, Formula 1 heads had to look at every inch of their circuits and make changes. Hockenheimring was the whole reason behind it. So the barriers were finally installed along the far section of the track. The chicanes were added to break up those terrifying high-speed straights. Still, the damage was done, I guess. For some fans, Hockenheim became forever linked with this tragedy. You'll still find a memorial near the crash site, a small, solemn tribute to one of the sport's greats. In 1970, F1 finally came roaring in at Hockenheimring, marking what I'd call the golden era of the track. And this wasn't just some ordinary race. I mean, the Nürburgring was the usual home for the German GP, but with the Nordschleife under renovation, it was like F1 found its rebellious cousin in Hockenheim, a track that was ready to prove itself as the ultimate high-speed, adrenaline-pumping venue. I remember that slipstreaming came around just at that time. It's where the drivers tuck in behind the car in front to gain speed before pulling out for an overtake. Naturally, this led to some incredible high-speed battles, particularly in the turbocharged cars of the 1980s. I know, for a fact, it gave us some of the most unforgettable moments in F1. Talk about 1982, for example. Didier Pironi in his Ferrari. This guy became victorious at Hockenheim, even though his car ran out of fuel on the final lap. He's literally coasting to the finish, cars slowing to a crawl, while his rivals are charging up behind him. And he still crosses the line first. Moments like that was the magic of Hockenheim. The Schumacher era saw massive crowds flocking to Hockenheim, with over 200,000 fans attending the race each year. Insane, right? And for a time, it seemed like Hockenheim would remain a permanent fixture on the F1 calendar for years to come. For me, Schumi made Hockenheim feel like the very heart of F1. In many ways, Michael's success from the mid-90s to the end of it is associated with this exact track. But here's where I find things get complicated. These iconic endless straights through the forest, well, they were becoming a problem. As incredible as they were for high-speed action, they isolated a lot of the track from the fans. For most of the lap, Schumacher and the rest were rocketing through the green, far from the grandstands. And we aren't nearly done about the safety. All because mad upgraded F1 cars were turning straights of Hockenheimring into near-death traps. This forced the organization to think again about the safety of the route. So even with Schumacher's superstar power, the whispers started. Is Hockenheimring a bit too wild for modern F1? And that's what fans and organizers alike had to wrestle with, I think. Could Hockenheimring evolve, or would it eventually have to give up its place on the calendar? So the time dictated the track to change. If Hockenheimring wanted to stay in the F1 game, it had to make a hard turn toward modernization. And they did. The pivot points of Hockenheimring change came in the 2000s. In 2002, Hockenheimring called in Hermann Tilke, F1's go-to architect, to completely reimagine the track. High-speed forest straights? Gone. Tilke cut them down and replaced them with tighter corners, meant to pump up overtaking opportunities. The track shrank from nearly 7 kilometers down to just over 4.6. For a viewer's sake, all of the far section was literally replanted. It was like the end of an era, I guess. Yeah, the drivers liked the new setup. Fewer death-defying straights, more overtaking chances, and an overall smoother experience. But for the fans, I guess it was a split. A lot of them felt like something special had been lost. That primal thrill, that sense that anything could happen in these long, shadowy straights. Suddenly, it was like Hockenheimring had been tamed. Want to know the price of that redesign? 62 million euros. A price amount that would put the route organization into debt for some time. The modern Hockenheimring may have been safer and slicker, but financially, it was a burden. And the main question, was this modernization worth the price? It's the 2010s. Hockenheimring just wasn't pulling crowds like it used to. In 2014, only 94,000 fans showed up for the German Grand Prix, a massive drop from the Schumacher-packed stands of 2006, which drew over 230,000. Fewer fans meant less money. Hosting an F1 race costs millions, and with ticket sales plummeting, the financial hit was huge for the track. So it was a time for bold moves. They tried sharing the burden with the Nürburgring, as Hockenheimring agreed to take turns hosting the German Grand Prix every other year. It sounded like a decent compromise, I guess, but it wasn't enough. By 2015, the financial pressure was just too much. And for the first time since 1960, there was no German Grand Prix on the F1 calendar. A country with some of the richest motorsport in history. And suddenly, without a home race, Hockenheimring came back in 2016. And there was hope. Then, in 2018, despite these moments and temporary highs, the money just wasn't there to keep Hockenheimring in the F1 game long term. And sadly, we're approaching the last race in history on the track that took place in 2019. So, it's German Grand Prix 2019. I find this an epic farewell for Hockenheimring, packed with changing weather, breathtaking overtakes, and pure chaos. Max Verstappen clinched the win, but honestly, the real winners were the fans. They got one last thrill at this iconic circuit, witnessing it in all its glory. And then, Formula 1 packed up and left Hockenheimring for good. It's all about the money in our cruel world. The once vibrant circuit is now mostly abandoned. Its long, far straight silent, nature creeping in where engines used to roar. Sure, the memories will live on, but just like that, the Hockenheimring we loved was gone. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and as always, don't forget to share and like this video. And of course, turn the notifications bell on, as it really helps me to make more content like this. Until then, bye-bye. Keep your engines revving, folks.